Do you remember when a single orange in your stocking was enough to make you feel like the richest kid on the block? When the world outside was cold and uncertain, but the kitchen was warm with the smell of something, anything cooking on the stove. That was Christmas during hard times. Not a feast, but a miracle. Every bite a small victory, every crumb a story of survival. Tonight, I want to take you back. Back to the days when $1 could feed a family for a week and love was measured in ladles and loaves. These are the 25 cheap Christmas foods our grandparents made when money was tight, and every one of them is a lesson in ingenuity, grit, and the kind of love that keeps you going when the world says you shouldn't. Just flour and water, that's it. When the cupboards were bare and the snow piled high against the door, folks would make what they called water biscuits. No milk, no butter, sometimes not even salt. Just flour, water, and a hot oven. They'd come out hard as a rock if you weren't careful, but with a little gravy, maybe from a boiled chicken if you were lucky, they'd fill your belly and warm your hands. Cost? Maybe 2 cents a batch, if that. And the taste? Like hope, if you were hungry enough. But sometimes you needed something to soak up the broth. That is when cornbread came to the rescue. In the South, cornmeal was cheaper than flour, and it kept longer. Grandmothers would mix cornmeal with a pinch of salt, a splash of water, and whatever fat they could spare, bacon drippings if they had them. Baked in a cast iron skillet, it came out golden and crisp on the edges. A slice of that, hot from the oven, could make a meal out of nothing. Cost? Maybe a nickel for the whole pan, and if you had a little molasses to drizzle on top, well, that was Christmas morning right there. While cornbread kept the hunger at bay, sometimes you needed a little sweetness to lift your spirits. That's when water pie made its appearance. Sounds strange, doesn't it? But water pie was a depression miracle. Just water, sugar, a spoonful of flour, and a dab of butter if you had it. Poured into a pie crust and baked until it set. It tasted like vanilla custard, if you closed your eyes and wished hard enough. Cost? Maybe 6 cents for the whole pie. And the best part? It made you feel like you hadn't missed out on dessert after all. But not every treat came from the oven. Sometimes the best sweets were made from scraps. Potato candy, for instance. Leftover mashed potatoes were mixed with powdered sugar until it turned into a dough, then spread with peanut butter and rolled up tight. Sliced into little pinwheels, it was a candy that cost pennies and tasted like Christmas magic. Kids would fight over the last piece, and mothers would smile, knowing they had turned nothing into something special. And when the potatoes ran out, there was always bread pudding. Stale bread soaked in a mixture of milk if you had it, or just water and a little sugar. Maybe an egg, maybe not. Baked until golden with a sprinkle of cinnamon if you were lucky. It was the kind of dessert that made you grateful for leftovers. Cost? Whatever you could scrounge. But the smell of it baking could make even the coldest house feel like home. Of course, not every meal was sweet. Beans and rice were the backbone of many a Christmas table. It was cheap, filling, and full of the kind of slow-cooked comfort that sticks to your ribs. A pound of beans cost maybe 5 cents, and a sack of rice cost not much more. Simmered together with a little onion or a ham bone if you had one, it was a meal that could feed a crowd. And on Christmas it was served with pride because it had meant no one went hungry. But sometimes you needed a little meat to make it feel like a holiday. That was when chicken and dumplings made their appearance. Chicken was cheaper than turkey or ham, and if you raised your own, it was practically free. The hen was boiled until tender, the meat was pulled off the bone and stretched with simple dumplings made from flour, water, and a pinch of baking powder. The broth was rich, the dumplings soft, and the whole pot could feed a family for less than a quarter, and the memory of that meal would last a lifetime. And if you didn't have chicken, you made do with Hoover stew. Named after the president who presided over the worst of the Depression, It was a hodgepodge of macaroni, canned tomatoes, beans, and sliced hot dogs, if you could spare them. Everything went into the pot and nothing was wasted. It wasn't fancy, but it was hot, filling. It cost maybe 10 cents for the whole pot. And on a cold Christmas night, that was enough. But sometimes you needed something to spread on your bread. That's where chocolate gravy came in. In the South, mothers would mix cocoa powder, sugar, and a little flour with water or milk, if they had it, and cook it until thick. Poured over hot biscuits, it was a breakfast that felt like dessert. Cost? Maybe 3 cents a serving. And the taste? Like a hug from someone you missed. And when there was no chocolate to be found, molasses cookies filled the gap. It was cheaper than sugar, and it gave cookies a deep, rich flavor. Mixed with flour, a little lard or bacon fat, and whatever spices you could find, they baked up soft and chewy. A dozen cookies might cost a dime, but the memory of them, warm from the oven and eaten by the fire, was priceless. But not every treat was baked. Popcorn balls were a Christmas staple, especially for children. Popcorn was cheap, just a few cents for a big bag, and when mixed with a syrup of sugar and water, it could be shaped into balls and wrapped in wax paper. Sometimes, if you were lucky, there would be a few drops of food coloring to make them festive, but even plain, they were a treasure. And the best part? You could eat them while listening to carols on the radio, the whole family gathered close. And if you had a little more sugar to spare, you might make vinegar pie. Sounds odd, but it was a clever trick. When lemons were too expensive, a splash of vinegar gave the pie a tartness that made it taste almost like lemon meringue. Sugar, eggs, if you had them, flour and vinegar were all baked in a simple crust. Cost? Maybe 8 cents for the whole pie, and the taste was tangy, sweet, and full of memories. But sometimes you needed something to sip. Tomato juice cocktail was a holiday favorite, especially in the cities. Canned tomato juice, a sprig of parsley if you had it, and a dash of salt. Served in little glasses, it felt fancy, even if it cost just a penny a cup. And it was good for you, too, full of vitamins, or so the mothers said. And when the weather was especially cold, nothing warmed you up like a bowl of cabbage and noodle stew. Cabbage was cheap, just a cent or two a pound, and noodles could be made from flour and water. Simmered together with a little bacon fat, it was hearty, filling, and could feed a family for less than a dime. The smell of it cooking would draw everyone to the table, hungry and grateful. But sometimes you needed a little crunch. That's when fried bread, called pizza frita by some, made its appearance. It was leftover bread dough, stretched thin and fried in hot oil. Sometimes it was sprinkled with a little sugar if you had it, or it was eaten plain. It was a treat that cost almost nothing, but tasted like a holiday. And if you were lucky enough to have apples, baked apples were a Christmas tradition. Cored and filled with a spoonful of sugar, maybe a raisin or two, then baked until soft and bubbling. The smell alone was enough to make your mouth water. Cost? Maybe 3 cents an apple. And the taste? Like Christmas morning, warm and sweet. But sometimes you had to get creative with what you had. Mock apple pie was a Depression classic. No apples? No problem. Just layer Ritz crackers in a pie crust, pour over a syrup of sugar, water, and lemon juice, and bake. The crackers softened and took on the texture of apples, fooling even the sharpest tongue. Cost? Maybe 10 cents for the whole pie. And the pride of pulling it off was worth every penny. And when you needed something to fill you up, meatloaf was the answer. Ground meat, beef, pork, or whatever you could find, stretched with breadcrumbs, oats, or even mashed beans. Baked in a loaf pan, it could feed a family for a fraction of the cost of a roast, and the leftovers made sandwiches for days. Cost? Maybe 15 cents for the whole loaf. And the feeling of plenty, even when there wasn't much, was the real gift. But sometimes you needed a little cheese to make things special. Macaroni and cheese was a holiday favorite, even when cheese was scarce. A little went a long way, melted into a white sauce made from flour, water, and a dab of butter. Mixed with macaroni, it was creamy, filling, and cost maybe 12 cents for a big pot. And the smiles it brought to the table were worth more than gold. And when the cheese ran out, there was always cabbage and potato dumplings. Cabbage, potatoes, a little flour, and a lot of love. Boiled until tender, then tossed with butter, if you had it, or just a sprinkle of salt. It was a dish that filled you up and made you grateful for the earth's bounty. Cost? 6 cents for a whole pot, and the memory of it, shared with family, lingers long after the hunger fades. But sometimes you needed a little crunch to go with your stew. Toasted pumpkin seeds were a favorite, especially for children. They were saved from Halloween jack-o'-lanterns, washed, salted, and roasted in the oven. They cost nothing but a little time, and the taste, nutty, salty, and warm, was a reminder that nothing should go to waste. And when you needed a little something to nibble, oatmeal cookies made with bacon drippings were a Depression staple. Oats were cheap, and bacon fat was saved from every breakfast. Mixed with flour, sugar, and a pinch of cinnamon, they baked up crisp and flavorful. A dozen cookies might cost a nickel, but the memory of them, eaten by the fire with cold hands wrapped around a warm mug, was worth far more. But sometimes you needed a little pudding to end the meal. Poor man's pudding was a favorite, just flour, sugar, baking powder, and water, baked with a sauce of brown sugar and water poured over the top. It baked into a soft, sweet dessert that cost maybe 4 cents for the whole pan. And the taste? Like a promise that things would get better. And when you needed a little protein, cottage cheese and potato dumplings were a clever trick. Cottage cheese was made from leftover milk, and potatoes were always cheap. Mixed with flour and boiled, they made a filling meal that cost almost nothing. And the satisfaction of making something from scraps was the real reward. But sometimes you needed a little candy. Sugar tit, they called it. Just a lump of sugar wrapped in a piece of cloth given to a child to suck on. It cost a penny, maybe less, but to a child who'd gone without, it tasted like heaven. And when you needed a little something to drink, hot milk punch was a holiday treat. Milk was heated with a spoonful of sugar and a dash of nutmeg. Served in mugs, it warmed you from the inside out. Cost? Maybe 5 cents a cup. And the comfort it brought was worth every drop. But sometimes you needed a little something to share. Popcorn, strung on thread and hung on the tree, was both decoration and snack. It cost pennies, but the laughter and stories shared while stringing it were priceless. And when you needed a little something to remember, a single orange in your stocking was the greatest gift of all. Oranges were expensive, 10 cents apiece, sometimes more, but on Christmas morning, that bright, sweet fruit was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times there was sweetness to be found. But the heart of every Christmas, the dish that brought everyone together, was chicken and dumplings. Not because it was fancy, but because it was made with love. The chicken boiled until tender, the dumplings dropped by the spoonful into the bubbling broth. The whole family gathered around the table, bowls in hand, grateful for another year together. Cost? Maybe 20 cents for the whole pot. But the memory of that meal, the warmth, the laughter, the love, was worth more than all the riches in the world. So if your grandmother made any of these dishes, or if you remember the taste of bread pudding on a cold December night, let us know in the comments. Share your stories, because these recipes aren't just food, they're history. They're proof that even in the hardest times, they helped keep us alive.